So the next person I'd like to come up is Jesse Greenlee, who by the way, you know, the Autism Award this year was the award so nice we had to make it twice because Jesse's doing some really great work in this area as well. And so Jesse's career is ready to launch in the area of autism. And Jesse, it'd be lovely if you give us a sense of what you're all about.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. So thank you so much for having me and for everyone who's here this afternoon. As he said, my name is Jesse Greenlee. I am a developmental psychologist who is currently a postdoc at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, working at the Weissman Center with Dr. Stegan Hartley. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the work I've been doing recently, as well as sort of where I see my research on this in this particular area moving forward. So autism spectrum disorder, as Tyler gave a brief overview just a minute ago, is a heterogeneous neurodevelopmental disorder that presents early in life and lasts throughout the life course and is primarily characterized by two symptom clusters: social communication deficits as well as repetitive behaviors. But this is a pretty simple way of thinking about autism spectrum disorder, because we know that there's a host of other challenges in all sorts of domains of functioning that a lot of folks with autism struggle with. And for me, I'm particularly interested in the co-occurring mental health difficulties that so many individuals with autism face. So we know a few things about these comorbid mental health challenges and autism. We know that they're pretty common, and we know that they're associated with a host of other problems across multiple domains of functioning. We also know that it takes considerable resources to both identify those in need as well as intervene effectively. So it's important for research to identify modifiable risk and protective factors that allow for targeted prevention and intervention efforts before mental health problems significantly impair children's lives. And so my research very broadly really aims to do that by asking this big question of what is the etiology and course of mental health comorbidities in children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder. And to answer this question, I draw really heavily from family systems theories, which conceptualize the family as interactive, interdependent unit in which something that affects one member of the family will affect all members of the system. In addition, the system is made up of smaller subsystems, like the couple relationship, in which the same interdependent relational processes apply. If this looks a little bit messy and complex to you, that's because it can be pretty messy and it can be some complex research to try to get your mind around. And so we can think just a little bit about a single subsystem at a time. And so in this instance, let's focus in for a moment on the couple subsystem. Disruption and stress is a major theme found across studies of couples who have a child with autism, with couples at risk for increased and more severe partner conflict, lower marital satisfaction, and separation and divorce. Research in this area has generally focused on predictors of marital relationship processes in this population. Well, something's not right here. There we go. But less is really known about that sort of opposite effect, about how the marital relationship, how that functioning has an impact on outcomes for children with autism, or the mechanisms through which that takes place. In non-autism samples, there's support for the spillover hypothesis, which is the idea that the affective and behavioral tone within one family relationship can spill over into other relational processes within the system. That is, conflict and dissatisfaction in the couple relationship could spill over into other parts of the family, like parenting. Parents who report marital relationship quality poor marital relationship quality generally exhibit more maladaptive parenting approaches, beliefs, and behaviors. And this parenting is, in turn, associated with increased emotional and behavioral problems in children without autism. I hypothesized a similar pathway would be present for kids with autism as well, and that marital satisfaction would be associated with child outcomes longitudinally through its impact on parenting. And indeed, we found evidence to support this hypothesis. We found that less marital satisfaction at baseline predicted increases in maternal authoritarian parenting and paternal permissive parenting a year later, which went on to predict increases in child internalizing symptoms at time 3, a year after time 2. And so this research does a couple of things. One, it supports sort of a growing body of evidence for the spillover hypothesis in families with a child with autism. It also shows that parents and how they parent matters for kids with autism, which is kind of an underdeveloped idea in the field. And it also suggests several points of intervention within the family system. But what this doesn't do is help us to understand for which children this process is important. In other words, it begs the question, does the family impact all children with autism the same way? So just as the phenotypic expression of autism is heterogeneous and multifaceted, it's also likely that individual differences exist in socio-emotional challenges children and youth with autism face, as well as the ways that families impact those individual outcomes. Emotion dysregulation has not only been implicated as a risk factor for psychopathology in a number of populations, but also plays a big role in autism spectrum disorder. Importantly, children vary in the ways that each of these facets of autism play into emotion dysregulation, and profiles of emotion dysregulation are likely similarly varied. There are also a number of ways in which the family system has been hypothesized to influence emotion regulation skills early on, including via the emotional climate of the family. So I had the question, sort of two big questions. First, what is the developmental trajectory of emotion dysregulation in this population across early and middle childhood? And relatedly, are there individual differences in these trajectories? And then two, is there anything about the family environment that might modify these trajectories? So we found, first, a lot of individual differences, actually. And this is a spaghetti plot of all 188 of our kids. And you'll notice there's quite a bit of individual differences here. Generally, we saw the average trajectory declined over the 3 years of the study, which was good news. But we also found several indicators of family emotional climate altered these trajectories. And to give you one example, we found that for kids whose mothers endorsed few depression symptoms at baseline, those kids showed declines in emotion dysregulation over time, sort of similar to the average trajectory. But kids of mothers with higher depression symptoms had high and stable trajectories across these 3 years. So it appears that there are some modifiable factors in the family environment that could help improve child outcomes. And results of this study really also begin to hint at individual differences in the ways in which families impact children with autism as well. And for many people here today, these studies that I've highlighted are not really new ideas per se. In fact, these are things that we've really been studying in developmental and clinical sciences for quite some time. But these kids with autism and other similar seldom heard populations need us to focus our energy on answering these questions as well. And it just really is an area of pretty big need. So while these findings suggest several things, they do bring to my mind two sort of key follow-up questions. First, I just presented evidence that maternal depression might be important for child emotion dysregulation. And the next question for me is really how. particularly in terms of the developmental acquisition of emotion regulation skills. And it's worth repeating here the point that parenting is one of that might be one of those linking mechanisms that could be a modifiable factor in particular. Second, the results suggest at least some individual differences in emotion dysregulation and therefore likely emotion regulation in children with autism. We need to understand now how those individual differences confer risk for later psychopathology. And these are two examples of my own next steps in this line of work, and I'm currently working on projects that aim to address these very questions. But I wanted to leave you with sort of a picture of a larger, longer-term goal that I have for this line of research, which is to pull all of this together. And this is really represented pretty well by models by, for example, Morris and colleagues, among some others. But in adapting it to autism samples, it'll really be important for myself and similar other researchers doing this kind of work to think about the specific needs and challenges and strengths of individuals with autism and their families and adapt these sorts of frameworks to meet those needs in order to really develop specific and targeted interventions on mental health in this population. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to the committee for having me here and for all the support from my various mentors the last couple of weeks.